expectation that we're going to have a large crowd. There will probably be a time limit on speakers, either 3 or 5 minutes, depending on the number of folks who express an interest in speaking, in order to give everyone who wants to speak an opportunity to speak. So if anyone's planning to speak, they should be prepared to speak within the allotted time, make good use of that time. We're going to start the hearing off with kind of an overview, and so people can see where we are setting. We're also going to just hopefully make it clear what the process is going forward, and also summarize some of the things we've heard to date. So kind of set the stage for the public hearing. And then on Tuesday, the 8th, is our registered marijuana dispensary licensing hearing, and that's going to be at 7:30 in this room. And I suspect that too will have a high turnout, because I know a lot of people are concerned about the RMD, registered marijuana dispensary. So that's next Tuesday at 7:30 for the RMD, and this Thursday in this room, it's going to be a joint public hearing with the Selectmen and the school committee at 7:30 about the ninth school.
Is that in this room or downstairs?
In this room.
I wanted to highlight 2 upcoming events following the spirit of our chair. Tomorrow evening, there's going to be a final presentation about the MIT sort of study report. The town has worked with an MIT class to do a study of the Route 9 corridor between the Boston line and Cypress Street, and the final presentation of that work is going to take place tomorrow evening, I believe at 7 p.m. in room 103 here at Town Hall. It should be an interesting presentation, and hopefully will kickstart some further discussions and conversations, and maybe even some actions regarding that corridor. And then the second event, which I think is worthy of noting for my colleagues on the board and for the public who may be watching, is a follow-up meeting to an EDAB conversation, an Economic Development Advisory Board conversation, which started maybe in the mid to early fall. And that event is on Monday, the 7th of December, so next Monday, at 7 p.m., again in room 103. And that's going to be a panel discussion about what we expect from developers. Again, I think it'll be an interesting conversation, and there's a lot of development conversation swirling around now, and hopefully EDAB will allow all interested parties to look into the crystal ball and figure out what we want and how we can get there.
Right. Any other announcements? I know on a week from tomorrow, the League of Women Voters is sponsoring in this room an affordable housing forum. Mm-hmm. So, but I'll remind folks next week, but that's next Wednesday in this room. Okay, so let's move on to our miscellaneous calendar, and I'll need my glasses, and I will apologize to everybody. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I won't be my usual animated self. So the first item is the...
We'll try to pick up the slack for you there.
Yeah,
Animation.
yeah, you'll have to wake me up, perhaps. Hopefully not. The November 24th minutes, anyone have any corrections?
I had some that I have given to Kate.
I had some edits as well.
Okay.
Kate has.
So I will move acceptance of the November 24th minutes as amended. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
I abstain because I was not here.
That's a good reason. And Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We have 2 transfers within the Board of Assessors appropriation, $10,000 from salary to outside counsel, That's one transfer within the Board of Assessors appropriation, 10,000 salary to outside counsel. Mr. McCabe?
Yes, Chairman Waschinsky, thank you. Gary McCabe for the Board of Assessors. Come before you to request a transfer of funds within the assessing department from our regular salary account of $10,000 to a line item for outside services, specifically outside legal counsel, to work with the Board of Assessors in defense of certain utility personal property tax appeals now pending before the Appellate Tax Board. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the details of the surplus or the litigation, to the degree I can answer litigation questions.
Right. Any?
Why don't you give us a 30-second spiel on where the litigation is and when the outcome is expected?
Be happy to do that, Selectman Franco. We have a number of pending appeals that fall under the utility category. Personal property tax on utility companies. One is Verizon New England is appealing their assessment for a few years, 3 or 4 years of appeals. And RCN Becocom, a similar company, is appealing their assessment for several years against us, the Town of Brookline Board of Assessors, and the Commissioner of Revenue of the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. And the reason that that's occurring is because the assessments were actually set by the Commissioner of Revenue in those two cases, not by the Board of Assessors. Because that is the type of property where the Commissioner of Revenue by law is assigned responsibility to assess those properties, we, the Board of Assessors, can also file an appeal against that assessment, which we've done. So it's a very unusual case in those two properties where the taxpayer can file an appeal and the Board of Assessors can also file an appeal. So we've done that. Those cases are being heard, are scheduled to be heard at the Appellate Tax Board. Those two companies, RCN, Becocom, and Verizon New England, have filed an additional appeal appealing the tax rate that's been applied to their property. This is a significant appeal because it speaks to the constitutionality of the split tax rate, a timely topic given tonight's classification hearing later on. So again, Verizon New England and RCN Becocom are appealing the constitutionality of a split tax rate. That actually had already been heard at the Appellate Tax Board. The Appellate Tax Board ruled in favor of the assessors, us. We've joined in with several other communities on that case, City of Boston, City of Cambridge, and the Brookline and Newton parties in that case. That case is now going before the appeals court. So we have reason for outside counsel there. We also have evaluation cases at the Appellate Tax Board with Comcast Corporation on their cable system here in town, and appeals with NStar Electric or Eversource on their distribution system. The update on that is the NStar case has been heard at the Appellate Tax Board. Briefs have been filed, and the Appellate Tax Board expects to rule on that by March or so. Again, the valuation cases on RCN, Becocom, and Verizon have not started, and the valuation case with Comcast has not started. So one bit of good news in all of that, Selectman Franco, is that there was another case that we've resolved, and that was Boston Gas Company on their distribution system, also known as National Grid, owned by National Grid. We resolved that. Those cases were outstanding from fiscal year 12 to 15, and those have been resolved and settled. So we no longer have those cases pending. So we're making progress in that regard, and hope that the NStar case will be resolved in the spring, that the appeals court will look at that RCN and Verizon New England constitutional case side with the appellate tax board and say, no, a split tax rate is constitutional as it applies to personal property, and that those valuation cases either will be settled or moved quickly through the appellate tax board. It'll be a year or two before I can report where we're done.
No, I think we can, I think we have enough information to
Oh,
vote.
sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
I will move that we approve the following transfer within the Board of Assessors appropriation, $10,000 from salary to outside counsel. All those in favor, Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
McCabe. And now we have the question of approving a transfer within the Veteran Services appropriation from $200 from Memorial Veterans Day to outside travel. Mr. McGrody.
Good evening. Thank you very much. This year, we went to the training in the scenic city of Leominster. I'm very fortunate this year to have Michelle Early working with me. She replaced Anne Marie when she retired at the end of last year, and Michelle's done a great job. We brought her, we both went together to training, and it just came to a little over what our training budget is. So I'm requesting a transfer from the Memorial Day budget to cover that $200.
Any questions?
Oh, but let me comment on the Veterans Day event, and I thought it was extremely nice. And I just want to commend you for organizing it and doing such a good job.
And we had to move it inside because
Yeah, we did
the
have to
weather
move
didn't
inside, but
cooperate.
I still thought that, I brought my grandchildren, and I thought that they got a lot out of it. They paid great attention. They were interested in hearing what the veterans especially had to say, so I thought it was a very good event.
Yeah.
I want to thank you all for your support, and it was a very healing day, especially when we were focused on our Vietnam veterans. It was a very healing day, and I had Bill McDermott in my office today, and he very clearly told me he'll never speak in public again for me.
He did a great job.
Thank you. Next week, and I probably won't be here because I'll be doing outreach at the American Legion during their meeting, but there's going to be a vote for the raising of the flag for Cornelia Schultz. She's a World War II veteran and truly a pioneer in her day. And the footprint that women have in the military now is based on courage of young women like Cornelia back in the day. And she was a lifelong member of the American Legion and always led the way for women and veterans. And she was tough. When we did the Flag Day Parade, she was 85, and she not only watched the whole parade route in uniform, in high heels, but she'd fight with me because I wouldn't let her hold the flag because I was worried about her. We'll raise that flag probably on the 14th if it's okay with you guys.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll move that we approve the following transfer within the Veteran Services appropriation. $200 from the Memorial Veterans Day account to other travel. All those in favor, Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Next is the question of approving the application of Kausarn, doing business as Kausarn Cuisine, Nutita, Aramthip manager, holder of all kinds of alcoholic beverage license as a common victualler, and for the appointment of Cholada Aramthip as an alternate manager. And I do believe the application is in order and that the police department has made the appropriate background checks and finds no reason to deny the application. So I will therefore move that we approve this application for an alternate manager. All those in favor, Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And then we now have some temporary alcoholic beverage licenses. The first group is to the Lars Anderson Auto Museum for a holiday. One is for a holiday party December 4th, it's 6:30 PM to 11. Another is December 11th for a holiday party, 6 to 11. Another is for a product launch, December 19th, 5:30 to 10:30. Another is for a museum concert, December 18th, 7 to 11. We have another group of temporary licenses for Pine Manor College, all kinds alcohol on January 23rd for a birthday party, 6:30 to 11:30. For a bat mitzvah on January 30th, 2016, 5:15 to 10:30, and wine and malt for a wedding, January 16th, 2016, from 4:30 to 10. I will move that we approve them in an omnibus fashion, and all of the applications appear to be in order. So, all those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green? Aye. And the chair votes aye. Moving on to our calendar. The first item is the question of filling a vacancy of staff assistants in the Human Resources Department. I don't see anyone here to, Mr. Faison. Well, why don't we move on to the next item, the ambulance contract. And now we have the question of approving and executing a new contract with the Fallon Ambulance effective January 1st. Chief Ford.
Good evening. Well, if you remember back, June of 14, our current contract with Fallon was expiring. It's a 5-year contract. They had been a long-term EMS provider in town. We had an option of an extension. I came before you to exercise that option. And at that time, I was requested that I look further into our dealings and the contract and other entities that might want to be involved. I have done that over the last year and a half, spoken with other chiefs, spoken with Chief O'Leary, and he and I both feel very strongly that we want to stay with Fallon. Fallon is very cooperative with us, it works well. I was actually a little fearful when I came here, because I came from an entity where the EMS provider was directly part of the fire department, and here it's a private service that is melded within the department, and I was happily surprised at how well they work together. Their guys with my guys all the time, and it just fits well. So we didn't, Chief O'Leary and I both feel we don't want to really branch out to someone else. But we did review the contract, and I've sent you copies of it and some changes, and some notable changes. I wanted to start this January 1st, which makes it a little odd, a 4.5-year contract. That just gets it back to our normal fiscal year in 4.5 years from now. But I wanted to get it up and running, part of it for some of the benefits this new contract brings. A lot of it was housekeeping, but some of the important points, we have in this contract an agreement that the 5 EMTs that we send to college each year for EMT classes, that Fallon will reimburse us for those costs. They actually have in the last 2 years, but this actually solidifies it in contractual form. It also does the same thing for the use of our AEDs. While we had provisions in the past contract, the provisions in this one are more favorable. But one of the largest areas of change, obviously, is the fact that we're going to receive some compensation for rent of the space. They are in our stations, 2 stations, and they have their living quarters and areas to park the apparatus and kitchen facilities and heat, electricity, and so forth. So we reached an agreement on some compensation to the town for that, which, with more discussion, I'd like to talk to you about where that compensation ends up ultimately. Another thing is a DICO officer, or at least some DICO is a disease and infectious control officer, which we have on the fire department, but we've made an agreement where they have some support for our personnel that works within their organization, so that will help us out also. That's an individual who's charged with really being the middleman for when a member of the department is injured, or more likely when they're exposed to some contagion, that they go to the hospital, and they're the middle person, the advocate within the hospital. So they're going to offer us some help in that area. So with all these different changes, I think this is a very good contract for the town. It's a good contract for the fire department because we keep our relationship with Fallon, which has been a very, very good working relationship. And we get some little influx of some funds, which again, I hope to remain within the fire department through one mechanism or another to offset some training costs that we incur each year.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
No, I will just say that I've heard good things about Fallon's service, and so I'm happy we're able to
Yeah.
reach a new agreement with them that's more favorable to the town even.
Right.
I'll simply highlight the fact that the chief and I had an opportunity this morning to catch up in a little bit more detail about the contract, and I want to applaud Fallon for stepping up and doing some things that currently are not in the contract or haven't been in the contract, and being a great partner to the town. So thank you for your past work, and I hope to see it continue in the future.
Right. Same here.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the chief for the summary of the proposed changes that you added, or that you provided us. It not only was a good summary of what was in the contract, but also gave me incentive to actually read the contract and see how accurate you were. But I mean, that's always a very useful way of presenting something that many times can be sort of either not read or read without really fully understanding all the implications.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I will therefore move that we approve the contract with Fallon Ambulance effective January 1, 2016. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much, Chief Green. Chief Ford. I'm losing it tonight.
Thank you.
Chief Green,
Do you
where
need
did that come
these?
from?
Would you like 2 copies? For
To,
the board? Yeah.
Yeah, this, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now we skipped over the Human Resources Personnel item. So this is the question of approving the filling of a vacancy in the position of Staff Assistant in the Human Resources Department. Ms. DeBoe.
Hi, I'm Sandra DeBoe, the Director of Human Resources. We have a vacancy that is coming as of Friday. One of our employees is taking off. She's become a butterfly, and she's flying away to chase her dreams of becoming a yoga instructor, and we applaud her for that. But it does leave us with a gap, and we do need to fill it. So we're here today to ask for authorization to fill the staff assistant position. It's a C6, a fairly low level. It's the entry-level position in our department.
Okay, any questions, comments? You want to,
Regarding?
diversity?
Well, actually, okay.
Do you want me to tell you how we're going to advertise?
Right. Selectman Wazinski asked me to ask you about the diversity issue. And we actually, Sandra and I actually discussed this over the
Okay.
phone today. And I would like you to sort of explain to us how the selection, or how the solicitation of applicants and the applicant pool for all of our town employee, all of our openings
Yes.
throughout the town is done, because I think that many people don't realize the extent to which, that process is carried out.
So it varies a little bit depending on the positions. Obviously, police and fire are very different because there's civil service off a list. But with regard to our other clerical, I call them clerical and administrative, so the lower than the mid-manager position, It's fairly routine process that we posted internally on our website. We post it around the town so that we'll get internal applicants. But we also post it at a minimum in Craigslist. There's another service that we use that I can't recall the name of it. I was going to get it, but then you guys were blowing through this agenda tonight. But it's also another one that we use for these lower level positions that really reaches out to, this is like the trend right now. It reaches out to a lot of other job boards. Another one that we're particularly proud of, that we've joined this year since April, I believe, is the Professional Diversity Network. This is a tool that everything that is put on our webpage gets picked up by the Professional Diversity Network. But I don't know how many people will apply from that network for this lower level position, but this is an amazing new tool that we have that goes out to a lot of different affinity groups that have resumes. There's a couple groups that are based on women professionals, African American, Black professionals, Hispanic, Latino professionals, Asian professionals. So this is a service that's used by a lot of very large companies too, and they have been very generous with us in giving us a very good rate because they really want to get into the municipal field. So we're working very closely with them. So that's probably the most exciting thing that we've done this year. It also goes out through the diversity and inclusion and community relations. They have that blueprint that you've heard about before that has a huge listserv. And also there are other people who can ask to be on the listserv, and they just automatically get every job announcement that goes out. So, and if you look at the applications that come in, and sometimes we have to close the application period very quickly with these lower level positions because we will get hundreds within a matter of days. And so we can tell it's very effective because we're really getting a broad range of people in our pools. So that's how we generally, with the higher level ones, it's a little bit more complicated. We get steering committees together. It's much more targeted using professional networks that we have and other groups that are in that specific field.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I asked you also if you could prepare that in sort of summary form for
Yes.
the board.
Yep.
Because I think many times people do not understand the process that is used to ensure that the applicant pool that we're looking for candidates from is as diverse and broad as it could be.
Right.
So, I mean, there's always room for improvement, but I think,
Yep.
we're doing a lot of good work, and hopefully they'll have, that will pay off in the future.
Yes.
So.
Great.
Okay, so I will move that we approve the filling of a vacancy in the position of staff assistants in the Human Resources Department. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
And now we have a number of board and commission interviews. And the first one up is Mark Mazur for the Board of Assessors. And this is your big night, presenting the tax classification to us.
Yes, timing is everything.
Yes. So why don't you tell us what you've been up to and...
Well, I've been on the Board of Assessors here for, I'm going to say about 10 years now, and I've enjoyed that process. In my full-time work, I'm the assessor in the town of Sharon. I've been doing that for over 25 years, and so I have a good background in assessing, and I hope that the knowledge I have from working in the field helps the board here. I know it helps me in my daily work in Sharon. So hopefully there's some cross-pollination here.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is, anyone have any?
No, I'm just
comments?
impressed that you're willing to do this in your spare time when that's what you do in your
I
work
like
time.
assessing, it's my field, and.
I guess we're going to have to rethink this. It must be much more fun than my mental image of it.
Yeah, this is,
But I should say, we thank you for being
sure.
willing to
My
do this
pleasure.
for us and continue.
I find it interesting that, like, the town that I work in is a very different composition than the town of Brookline, so there's different sorts of things that I deal with here that I don't deal with in Sharon, and so it's interesting.
Good.
right. Okay, well, that was an easy interview.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you. The next one up is Russell Seidel. Come on, join the party.
Hi, everyone.
Howdy, why don't you tell us about yourself and your interest in, this is for the Economic Development Advisory Board?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so, well, thank you, first of all, for allowing me to present myself. So, my name's Russell Seidel. I'm a faculty member at Suffolk University in the Business School at Beacon Hill, and resident of Brookline since 2013. So, a relative newcomer, but wanted to kind of advance my candidacy here for the Economic Development Advisory Board, just as a way to contribute some of what I see as my expertise to the idea of kind of business development, tax planning issues, the kind of I guess, mix of development in the area. I see a lot of kind of interesting things that are being done in Brookline, and I'd love to be able to contribute to that in some way, shape, or form. And I guess that's really kind of the crux of my interest in this committee.
Have you spoken with the chairs of EDAB, Ann Myers and Paul Sainer?
I haven't had a chance to, no. I mean, I've kind of gleaned some information just based on the documents up on the website, certainly, but haven't had a chance yet to kind of interact with them formally.
Yeah, this is a very, this has been a very successful board, and I think it's a board that's very important to the town, and there's a lot of stuff going on right now with respect to the board. It's a very active board, and it's one that I know I am, and I know my colleagues are very interested in. So, anyone questions?
No, I will just say that you're obviously very qualified in this
Right.
area. It is, we don't actually have any openings on it, and it's not to say, it's a long shot, but you could knock off one of the incumbents, but if it doesn't work out this time, I was just going to ask you to keep your eye out, because periodically, it's a big enough board that periodically we do get openings, and
Or resignations, yeah.
yeah, and clearly, you'd be an asset, I think.
Yeah, and that was really my interest. I mean, I don't presume to kind of knock anyone off necessarily, but I mean, just to kind of put myself out there and express the interest, I think was an important first step. So just to kind of get myself in front of you and at least express that interest, I think was
Sure.
an important step.
Sure.
Probably also a good idea to go to some of the meetings and
Sure.
talk to the chairs and find out about the time commitment.
Sure.
Right.
Because I do
Well,
think that it's,
Yeah,
Selectman Franco, you should tell them about their upcoming panel discussion, which, did you say it's Monday?
Yes, Monday, the 7th, this committee's having a public event entitled What We Expect from Developers. As a resident of the town, there's a lot of conversation about reuse of sites and bringing assets, retail opportunities, economic development to certain parts of town. So as part of a series of events on Monday, this committee is going to host I think it's a panel discussion about what we're expecting from developers, and present there are going to be a managing partner from National Development, a principal from Stantec, a former town council, and a former chair of the planning board and the board of selectmen, who are going to sort of speak about what's happened in the past, what we can look forward to to in the future, and how we can get the best outcome for the business community, for residents, and for developers that express an interest in town.
Great. Yeah, sounds good. So that's open to the public as
Oh,
well?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all these meetings are open to the public. So, yeah, you should check it out, and check out, the EDAB is a group that does a lot of work in subcommittees.
Right.
So you should check out what that board is up to.
So just to close the loop on that conversation on the 7th, it's going to be at 7 PM in room 103 of Town Hall, so the first floor of this building.
It's in the lobby. You walk in, it's to the left.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
very much.
thank you. Thank you for your interest. And the next one up is Mark Allen. Is Mark here? I don't see Mark. And how about Rosemary Battles Foy, Preservation Commission? And you've been on it a while?
Hello, yes, I have. And
Tell
I
us,
continue to be interested because I just enjoy it so much, and I feel that what I have to offer counts and helps the town.
So what have been some of the issues you've been involved in?
Well, I too will be at that meeting on Monday, what we expect from developers. So I'd say that's a big issue for the town, is how to grow economically and be successful and retain all the qualities that Brookline is really known for. And GOR, historic properties, their justice. Sometimes they're conflicting. We just try to compromise and make it go a little better.
Do you see any trends that we should be aware of?
Well, I mean, it would be no surprise to you, real estate values are increasing exponentially, and that attracts developers who are really looking to, sort of turn a really healthy profit, and that in turn prices out a lot of people in the community. And longtime residents can't afford to sell and then stay here, and preservation is part of that. And the other trend, I'd say, is to harness the tax incentives and power of historic preservation to help do economic development and growth. There is money to be found there, and there are ways to encourage business owners, for instance, to renovate their historic storefronts, or any number of things that preservation can help with development.
Yeah.
I see you seem to have a special interest in facade renovation, we'll
Well,
call
I
it,
was just
or
thinking about that,
preservation
yeah.
and
Yeah.
renovation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the planning board has done a great job in setting out more sympathetic limits to new business owners or people just taking over storefronts, and that it's kind of a less, it's just much more sympathetic, and I'm pleased the way the buildings are able, for the most part, to retain their perception, their.
Can you give us some examples of the ones that have been restored in preservation kind of mode?
Yeah, well, I mean, the town's always changing and improving. What is that Spanish restaurant on Beacon Street? They did a nice job with that facade there. And there are a couple vacancies that I would like to at least have a say on how they're redeveloped. That it's not Jack's Jokes Shop. It's a place next to that, and Pete's Coffee. There's a vacant storefront there, and it sort of has a really old sign. It needs a little bit of an oomph that would help peel back some of the layers and really show its historic character. I think that in and of itself is a driver of economic strength and power. You project an image of integrity and wholeness instead of things that are, 30 years old, signs that are kind of not looking great and buildings aren't great. So I think that's really important.
Thank you.
So I'll pick up on the same issue that Selectman Heller raised about preservation or renovation, restoration
Yeah.
of historic facades. There's actually a project going on now in the heart of Coolidge Corner, the arcade building. And we've got a program, which I don't think is really well publicized, to give, I think it's 0% loans to property owners who want to do some restoration work to facades.
I thought I saw something about that.
Yeah.
And, you know, no negative connotations intended, but I sort of stumbled on it, and I don't feel that a lot of people know about it, so
Yeah,
to
so
the degree we could help.
You're sort of going in the direction I was going in. Two-part question. First, are you aware of the program? And it sounds like you've stumbled upon it.
Just a little, yes.
And two, to the extent that you have recently become aware of it, are there ways that you think we can better publicize it, make it a better program, more effective program?
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've thought of everything I can sort of touch on the top of my head, including put it in a very prominent place on the website, link it with the economic development tab on the website, send out notices to business owners. I don't know if you ever have sort of like business development meetings or some sort of panel where you try to attract new business owners and such, that kind of thing.
So it's a program that's sort of administered by the economic development, the planning department.
You're all set
And I
with
think this interaction between preservation and planning on this particular program is an interesting one. And
Yeah.
I would encourage you to sort of get in contact with planning, with economic development, and figure out a way to make sure that it works from both an economic development
yeah.
perspective and a preservation
Sure.
perspective.
Well, I mean, I think the arcade itself is a great example of preservation, you know, that it's a really historic, beautiful building, and then there are these series of little businesses in there, and it's wonderful. I was thinking the other day about a market there. We could have like a craft market or something inside in February or something like that. I
Well,
mean,
they
that's
do
a
that,
great-
on Sundays in the winter, they do the winter farmers market inside there.
Yeah, okay, yes, I have to go to that. Thank you. Let's see, I was preparing in my head as I sat there, thinking about other hot-button issues and what I've done. I would say this, that the commission has had, like any board, ups and downs in terms of its makeup. And I think we've had quite a number of people on for a really good number of years now, and we've coalesced really nicely, a good combination of professions and interests and points of view also. I mean, some are less liberal in their interpretation and others are more. And I think that together I think we serve the town well and balance and try to work out, not be such sticklers that nothing ever happens, but at the same time, really trying to keep what makes Brookline special. So I would just put in that plug for the commission in general, and I'd like to think I'm part of it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Then, thank you. We're not doing reappointments tonight to the Preservation Commission, but
Sure.
You'll hear
sure.
from us.
You get a letter in the mail or
Yep.
something, yeah, right, thank you so much.
okay, thank you. Is Mark Allen here? Ah, okay. You almost missed it.
Oh. Sorry for my tardiness.
Okay, so you're looking for a reappointment to the Neighborhood Conservation Commission?
That's right, as a full
As-
commission member.
Okay.
Currently, I'm an alternate.
Okay.
But there is a free seat, and my fellow commissioners have unanimously supported me in becoming a full member.
So tell us about your time on the commission. As an alternate, have you been able to participate in the meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. No, the commission's been terrific. I've attended most meetings and of course voted and participated. I'm on two subcommittees. One was for the Toxteth neighborhood, which was our first, real victory in terms of having a neighborhood come forward to do exactly what we hoped would happen. And the second committee is coming up with the sort of rules and regulations for how we're reviewing projects that come up.
Have there been any cases out of the Toxteth?
We have had one case. It's a very good case. It came right as the right as the Toxteth NCD came into formation, and it was with a developer, which was in some ways the intent of the NCD was to have some development controls. This happened to be a very good developer and had a very appropriate plan for the house that the neighborhood mostly supported, and we guided a little bit, I think successfully, and they're very pleased with the project. I think on all sides it was a terrific resolution.
So what's your area of interest? You're an architect, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm a registered architect in Massachusetts. I'm a principal with the firm Wilson Architects downtown.
Questions, comments? Okay. So we'll be considering this over the next few weeks, and we'll get back to you.
Terrific.
Thank you for
Thanks
your
so much.
enthusiasm.
Yep. The next item on our agenda is the tax classification public hearing, but that's not noticed until 7:30, so I'm going to move up the last item on the agenda, which is some board and commission appointments. Mr. Kleckner?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are 4 boards and commissions up for your consideration this evening. The first is the Board of Assessors, and there is one expiring term, and there is the incumbent. Mr. Mazur is interested in reappointment, and he is the only applicant. So I will call the name, and you should indicate your approval. Mark Mazur.
Aye.
All right, he is reappointed for a term of 3 years. We now come to the Housing Advisory Board, and in this case, there is one expiring term in 2015. Mr. Blood, who is the incumbent, is interested in reappointment. There are also 2 other candidates, Harry Chevrat and Lark Palermo. So I will read them, but only vote for one. Roger Blood. Aye. Harry Chevrat, Lark Palermo. Mr. Blood is reappointed for a 3-year term. And now coming to the Preservation Commission.
Oh, then I was incorrect.
We're way ahead of the game. We're trying to catch up here. And we just want to make sure that we've interviewed all the applicants, so that was what was holding up this. So in this case, there is 2 expiring terms, one of which Ms. Selwyn is not seeking reappointment. Ms. Battles-Foy is seeking reappointment. So there are, let's see, bear with me for just a moment, please. And so there are two members, one the incumbent and the alternate. Actually, Mr. Kleiner is seeking promotion, if you will, up to commission members. So there are two vacancies, or 1 expiring term, a vacancy, and 2 applicants. So vote for 2, please. Rosemary Battles-Foy.
Aye.
Peter Kleiner.
Aye.
So both are appointed for a 3-year term. And then we come to the trustees of Walnut Hill Cemetery. And in this case, there are 2 expiring terms. Both of the incumbents are interested in reappointment, and we have an additional candidate. So there are 2 members who should be appointed out of 3. So I'll call the roll in the order they appear. Bob Cook.
Aye.
Richard Leary.
Aye.
Lark Palermo. So Mr. Cook and Mr. Leary are reappointed. Thank you. Sorry I went too fast. I know we have a few more minutes, but...
I'm going to,
I was just going to say, it looks like we've got 2 vacancies as alternates on the Preservation Commission now, so we'll take this opportunity to let people know that there are some vacancies, and if they're interested, send an application in.
right, we're also looking for members of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to propose that we take a 5-minute adjournment, and we'll come back at 7:30 for the tax classification public hearing.
What's that?
Don't shake my hand.
Yeah. It's very strange.
It's limited, we only have $10,000, the maximum loan that's allowed is $3,000. So at any given time, only three is commercial opportunity. So the question that might be to Mr. Selectmen is you guys put the budget together for January. Since it's a loan program. Congratulations, Mark. Isn't there a way?
Welcome back.
It was hard fought, but you did it.
Yeah. That's why we were here.
Yeah.
Program to the.
See, that came up at advisory years ago. No, it wasn't a problem, it was the enabling legislation. It was something,
Which didn't allow us to put.
I want to say that.
I don't know the origin,
Yeah.
but I'm just explaining the mechanics. Right now, we're kind of handcuffed. There are more applicants than we have.
Right. Yes, so you.
So there's a reason.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
No, I want you to
Come on, catch
be
this.
comfortable. So I'll introduce you. When we get started. We're also able to get our trains here. Oh, good. Budget transfer. Oh, that's good. They go to that.
So I say, I recognize you right now. Good. Coming back to you, respond. Because they weren't on here before this.
Hey, Kate. When I first came on the board, I was given a form to fill out for transfer of my meetings to my council. And I don't fill it out. Was that you?
Right, the additional increase is due to John revaluation. So, it's renovations.
I'll find this one.
And if you need a new one, just let me know, I'll put that.
Actually, right. The building went up 10 across the board.
So, I was in your neighborhood this weekend.
Yeah.
No, the
Oh,
other
her,
Nancy's.
yeah, okay. I'm always in her neighborhood because Clear Flower Bakery is in her neighborhood. So I waited in line an hour on Wednesday to get the bread and stuff for my stuffing.
You know, the
So
sad
what's the
thing
name of the
is,
bakery?
Clear Flower Bakery. It's the best in the whole Boston area, and
What's
it's in
what's
Brooklyn.
special about it?
Really, really good bread.
I mean,
They
is it-
also have
is it
really
healthy
good-
bread?
I like their buckwheat walnut loaf, which is pretty healthy.
Okay.
But their
So-
baguettes are
they
also
also have
good.
very good sweets.
Yeah,
Which is,
you know, like tarts,
Mhm.
like an apple tart or something like that. And a little chocolate, yeah, it's worth going to.
Where is it?
So-
On the harbor?
No, it's on.
you know where my street is?
Yeah.
So it's Abbotsford Road, so it's, if you just go all the way down my street to the end.
Yeah,
It's
you'll
there
get
in
to,
small group
it's
of
there,
stores.
it's kind of at the end of where Lawton and Thorndike come together.
Okay.
So they're very edge of Boston, Brookline, but it is in Brookline.
So
but
it's in a residential neighborhood as opposed to a business?
Well, it's a
more
little
residential,
business corner, but in a residential
Okay.
area. But
Oh, I know
it's,
what that is,
it's
yeah.
fabulous bread, really worth going for. I mean, usually I don't have to wait in line an hour, that was only because it was the day before Thanksgiving. The other thing they have there that I always get, I get the pizza kit, so you have the dough that's all made, and then you buy, they sell from Capone's, the tomato sauce that's good, and the cheese, 4 mixed cheeses. And so you just let the dough kind of warm up, spread it out. I saute my toppings, the tomato sauce, the cheese. Yeah, great pizza.
Okay, so we're now reconvening for the public hearing on the question of adopting the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of real property and personal property for fiscal year 2016, of which we are now in the midst. Mr. McCabe.
Thank you, Chairman Wyszynski. My name is Gary McCabe, Chairman of the Board of Assessors. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to join you in this hearing, make presentation of information that we hope to be helpful to you in making this tax classification decision for fiscal year 16. I want to start by introducing a few other people that are here with me, the rest of the Board of Assessors. Dr. Harold Peterson, Mark Mazur, who was just reappointed this evening, our Chief Deputy Rashid Belosine, and the newest member of our staff, Hinlan Wong, who has joined us this September. We're very excited to have Hinlan with us. He's a Brookline High graduate and has his master's degree from UMass. He's helped with this presentation already, and I'll share with you one of the exciting things we're doing on our website. Through this presentation, I'll be able to show you a little bit about that. I'm very excited to have Hinlan join our staff. So, what I would like to do is present the information through this PowerPoint slides, but also direct you to the workbook that we prepared and sent to you last Friday. In addition, as a supplement, we sent some, through the town administrator's office, we sent you some additional information yesterday afternoon with a cover memo. And the purpose of the additional information was to comport really with the Department of Revenue requirements in this area of tax levy and classification of the rate to shift the burden of the tax levy among several classes of property. This additional information became necessary and clearer to us. We apologize that it didn't go out Friday, but it went out Monday, for this reason, that in the spring, as you know, the town voted an override of $7.665 million. This board, your board, presented that override in a phased-in scheme. And the first part of that phased-in scheme was to add $6.2 million to the fiscal year 16 levy. So the original information that we sent you Friday included that $6.2 million. It did not speak so much to the higher override amount because we weren't using it in the calculations. However, that override still needs to be counted in the levy limit and the maximum allowable levy. So the additional information just makes that a little bit clearer, that we're only going to use the 6.2 million of the 7.6. But what it does for you is makes available really all the tax rate options without setting a hard limit to certain tax rates that might otherwise put us over the hard limit. It's a little bit softer limit. We understand the policy that the board's brought forward. We'll leave that decision to you. So it takes that hard levy limit and makes it a softer levy limit. I came up with a term called the target levy limit. So some of the tax rate options you have available go over the target, some come under the target. And it's just more clear, I think, in this supplemental information. The workbook is made up of several tabs, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go, or at the end, or both. All right. The workbook's made up of several tabs beyond the cover letter. The first tab starts with a report I just want to bring to your attention called, it's an annual report we prepare, the annual tax classification report, tab 1. The furthest column to the right, fiscal year 16, I again want to emphasize that that very first number, $195 million, includes the $6.2 million override, not the $7.6 million override. And that should be footnoted. Maybe you could do that in your copy. I didn't send out a new page on that. Again, the $195 million includes the $6.2 million override, not the $7.6. And so that flows through the rest of the information that we're using. Some of the other information contained in that comparative report, comparative current to prior years, makes the assumption, just for demonstration purposes, that we would have the same classification shift as we had last year, which was equivalent to a commercial shift of 1.715%. We'll talk more about that. Also in tab 1 is one of the slides you'll see. It's a change in our median value over time. We'll talk about that when we get to the slide in the presentation. And then the top taxpayer list that we've been providing, top real estate taxpayers and the top personal property taxpayers. There's been no change in the position of those. Our largest taxpayer continues to be the office building at 10 Brookline Place, followed by the collective properties of, taxable properties of Boston University. The personal property taxpayers are still, the largest is NSTAR Electric Distribution System. Some of the ones we talked about earlier tonight, Boston Gas, RCN, Verizon, and Comcast round out that list. Tab 2 is what we call some worksheets that you can look at that gives you more information in depth beyond the slide, the information that's provided in the slides. So on a few of the slides, we'll say, well, the more detailed information is back in tab 2. So what we present there is some information about the residential exemption as well as classification. We're going to present information on both of those things tonight, tax classification shifts, tax rates, as well as the residential exemption. And hope that you have enough information and time to go ahead and vote on those at the close of the hearing. The last worksheet in tab 2.
You know, typically, we don't vote until the following week.
Well,
Well-
we'll see if we can.
Okay. I like to digest it a little bit, but.
Okay. Well, you can ask to hold it.
Selectman Dale, all I was suggesting is you vote after the hearing. So,
Right.
right. Tab 3, I'd like to dive into a little bit here. This is the slides, and I'll present them on the overhead here, and they're also, my understanding is, will be presented on the TV, wherever you're watching that from, or the live streaming that is available as well. And then tab 4 is the 1, 2, and 3 family sale properties that we used to determine the fiscal year 16 assessments. So these are the comparable properties that we used to determine new assessments. One of the things we're going to be adding or expanding this year is that information is also on the website. I'm going to show you more about that. And then in tab 5 is sort of a placeholder where we put the tax recapitulation report, which we'll start working on as soon as you vote. And what that does is say, this is how we went from fiscal year 15 to 16. We have a balanced budget. This is how we're going to use the town's money, and ultimately what the tax rate needs to be. And then we'll submit all of that to the Department of Revenue for approval. So unless there's any other introductory type questions, I'd like to go through the slides.
Go for it.
On page, tab 3. Thank you. So the first slide is just an overview of how property tax fits into the budget. Property tax is making up, at this point, 70% of the town's budget. And the other sources are from top to bottom free cash, other sources, enterprise funds. So we've included the enterprise, water, sewer, and golf enterprises in this total. Estimated local receipts such as parking meters, fees and charges. And then the cherry sheet reimbursements, which is actually also already in tab 5. If you want to see what the state is giving us in what categories, that's in tab 5. The cherry sheet, it's actually the green one, not the pink one. The pink is our assessments. The second slide is a historic, thank you, view of over the last number of years of the tax, the budget is the top blue, and the levy, the bottom green. And as you can see on the left, in fiscal year 09, we were 63% reliant on the tax levy to make up our budget. And now we're 70%, as I just mentioned, reliant on the tax levy to fund our budget. A 7% increase over that time. So we've become more dependent locally on property taxes to fund our local government services. The next slide is a comparison of current year, fiscal year 16, assessed values to prior year. And the last, by major classification or major category of property. The last column, as noted on with the pointer, is the percent change year over year. Total residential class increased 9.8% to $17.7 billion. Total combined commercial increased 8.4% to $1.748 billion. Industrial, I want to provide an explanation here. Our industrial class of property has decreased 20% from 16 million to 12, almost 13 million. The reason for that is the former Red Cab site at 111 Boylston Street was classified as industrial when it was really a vacant former Red Cab site. It's been reclassified as commercial and is now under redevelopment as the extended stay hotel. So that value really didn't go away. It moved up into the commercial class. It was $4.3 million. The personal property increased 4.5% for all classes, utility as well as a business. Total taxable property increased 9.6%, to $19.7 billion, which keeps our place as the fifth largest valued community in the state, behind Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Nantucket, and Brookline. The combined CIP values, we do that because the commercial, industrial, and personal property will all get the commercial tax rate. So we combine those. 7.7% increase, and then tax exempt property, which went through somewhat of a revaluation, not as comprehensive as we do every 3 years, but somewhat at 3.8%. We also would like you to consider now, in a more granular way, within those major classes, individual or subclasses of property. The first is single family. We have 4,575 single-family properties, increased in value on average using a weighted mean statistic, 8.5%. Our predominant or largest class of property, residential condominiums, 10,011 properties, increased 10.6%. 2 and 3 family combined, 1,314 properties, increased 12.7%. Clearly our largest increase year over year. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Apartments, anywhere from 4 units to 500. The combined group of apartments, 326 properties, increased 9.3% on average. Commercial 9, and the industrial, again, a little bit misleading because we lost that property. I want to go back for just a moment to this 2 and 3 family. Last year when I stood up here, the 2 and 3 family actually showed the smallest increase of this group, you may recall. And we talked about maybe why that was happening. One of the things we thought we identified was this is sort of our oldest, one of our oldest sections of a housing stock, on average 100 years old, these properties. So what's happened in this sort of robust current market is that these properties become more attractive. Sale prices are up, but we've also seen purchase of existing 2 and 3 family homes and then renovations taking place very quickly. For example, the period we studied for this fiscal year 16 reassessment, a 24-month period going all the way back into 14 and then 15, 100 2 and 3 family properties sold, all right, that we used in our analysis. 28 of those were renovated between the sale date and the assessment date of January 1st, 2015. Quickly renovated at a relatively high percent. That's a greater percent than we've seen before. So they're being purchased, renovated, either for rental, for home occupancy and rental, or for future conversion to condominium. So that last one, the future conversion to condominium, is also driving up price on these 2 and 3 families. The next slide, you saw in one of the earlier tabs as well. We've been tracking what's called the median assessment of our 4 major residential classes. Single family, residential condominiums, 2 families, and 3 families. We've been tracking historically, and this is a graphic view of that. The lowest number is the condominiums, and you can see through really the recession and just beyond, relatively flat, but coming out of the recession, values have steadily increased. The red one at the top here is the 3 family. You can see that had the largest upswing this last year. All right. The green and the blue are the single family is the blue, and the green is the 2 family. Interesting dynamic there is that everything else being equal, they're the same median price for the same size property. So we'll see, we'll continue to track this and beyond. But this gives you a sense that these 3 families have increased more than the comparable classes. Next, I'm going to show you a video within this presentation, and it's a video of It simulates, if you went to the town website right now, and, geez, I'm hoping it comes up. I apologize, the video's not
It'll be
launched.
very slick if it does.
It did earlier. What we've added to the town website is the sale that you have in tab 4. The sale properties that we used for the fiscal year 16 assessment. A description of those properties, a photograph, a description, their assessment, their sale price. So we've added that to the town website along with the underlying map. So you'll see, if you go your tab 3 slide, again, I apologize why this isn't launching. On page 3 of tab 3, you have an image there of the map that's on the town website. It's interactive. You can go through the initial town website into maps, where there's these story map apps. This is a version of a story map application called the Assessment Sales Map app. And you can see 1, 2, and 3 family sales as well as condominium sales. If you go into the assessor's website, they'll be separate. 1, 2, and 3 family sales and assessments are a separate map from the condominiums. I'm going to reboot this, sorry. Maybe Austin can help me out.
Did you? I think you locked the computer.
I don't think so. Maybe we could reboot. We're going to try rebooting that, all right? I'll continue on to, through some of the slides for you. The next, in your tab 3, page 4, all right, there's a new growth slide. I'll get back to the story map app. We're hoping that comes up, all right? We're fearful of trying to launch the website for exactly this reason, that we wouldn't be able to. So we put the video inside the PowerPoint, and it doesn't like that, so. I'd like to go through that new growth slide with you. It says fiscal year 16, new growth. The total amount of $2,090,000, approximately $2.1 million, has been approved as levy growth that we can add in fiscal year 16 levy. All right. What made that up are these categories. You know, the single family, the residential condominiums, the multifamily, the commercial industrial, the personal property. So in total, almost $177 million of value growth qualified as levy growth. So the value growth times the prior year tax rate, which is fiscal year 15 tax rate, is the formula for calculating the fiscal year 16 levy growth. So that $2.1 million makes up approximately 1.15% of our levy growth in fiscal year 16. Okay. So when we went from the fiscal year 15 levy to fiscal year 16 levy, this $2.1 million is part of that increase. Another part of that is the $6.2 million override. And another part of that is the Prop 2.5. So in total, they add up to 7%. All right? So our levy is increasing 7%. The slide below that on page 4.
Wait, can I just, I'm
Go ahead.
having trouble following your numbers. The tax growth, it says on, I'm on page 4 of tab
Yes.
3, is $2,090,000.
Correct.
And you're saying that is 7%?
No, it's
No.
1.15.
Okay.
So, yeah, the
That
tab
plus
2,
2.5%.
Okay.
that's a place where you could go back to the tab 2 worksheet and see how we went from the fiscal year 15 levy to the fiscal year 16 levy. 2.5% plus growth plus the override.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
How does, maybe this is a question for Melissa, how does the new growth reflected here correspond to your growth assumptions in the budget?
Yeah.
So we budget new growth at 1.85.
Okay.
Million, 1.85 million. And we ended up with nearly 2.1. Right. So, sorry for the,
That'll help us a little with our free cash for next year.
So just to answer
Or
Selectman
thereafter.
Daley's question, it's 1.15, the total 7% increase. It's 1.15 is new growth, 2.5 is the allowable Prop 2.5 increase, and then the override accounts for 3.42% of that 7% increase, cumulative increase.
a footnote to that, if I may. The system we have, as one of you noted earlier, we're in the middle of the fiscal year, and here we are talking about the tax rate for the year. That's a quarterly billing system that the legislature has provided for us, and we've adopted locally. The first 2 quarter bills, first quarter of fiscal year 16, second quarter of fiscal year 16, real estate tax bills that went out were based on the prior year's tax plus an anticipated increase in the tax rate. So what we did is we increased those payments 7%. So it was a good estimate. So this third quarter and fourth quarter, everything else being equal, would be relatively equal to those first 2 payments. All right, and that's sort of the goal of quarterly billing, to even out the payments over the fiscal year and get cash in the door earlier to the municipality.
Assuming your assessment hasn't changed disproportionately to other classes.
Yes, thank you. That if your assessment increased more or less than the average, then that 7% is not going to hold true.
Right.
On the true up for the fiscal year, that's correct. All right. So we're back. I'm going to not chance the Story Map app, sales.
Oh, I was so looking forward
I
to
was
it.
getting all excited.
Well, I'd like to finish the slides and then go back and show it to you.
Okay.
Just so we don't have to go through that reboot again. We're very excited. We actually introduced that in fiscal year 15 and expanded it in fiscal year 16. I'd go so far as to say you won't have a section 4 in your book next year. You'll just go online and look at these. You can do one of 2 things. You call up the map, there's a little pinpoints, you pick on a pinpoint, you say, here's a sale, this is the assessment. You can move in and out and around that map to see if there's any other sale properties. So what we're hoping that property owners, taxpayers can look and say, you know, yeah, my assessment went up 7% or 10%. Does that make sense? And look at this online interactive map on the website and say, what did the properties in my neighborhood sell for and what are they assessed for? They'll be able to do their own research. And we think that's going to be a positive addition to our outreach, to taxpayer outreach. So, the next slide I wanted to show you is the history of the residential percentage of value and of tax levy because of shifting the burden, classification. So in this case here, the blue lines are the value, the residential value of Brookline. And it's on average been about 90% of the total. That's again true for fiscal year 16. that it's about 90%. It actually jumped a little from last year, from 15.7%. Jumped up from 15. So it's about 90% of the total of that $19.7 billion. About 17.7 billion or 90% is residential. Through tax classification, we've shifted the levy down to, on average, about 83%. So it's, on average, about a 7% shift between sort of the factor of 1, everybody has the same tax rate percent of 90% down to 83. Okay. This is a similar slide for the commercial, combined classes of commercial, industrial, and personal property. It shows the value in red here, on average of about 10%, but the tax on average of about 17%. So that 7% that shifted away from the commercial, reducing it from 90 to 83, has been shifted over the commercial, increasing it from 10 to 17. This next slide is sort of a combination of those things.
I have a question there.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the history of the CIP percentage value and tax levy.
Yes.
The slide, okay. So you say the average is 17, which is sort of where we are this past year, but actually the average, when you look back historically, is closer to 16.
Okay.
And so my question is, I mean, when I was on the board for the first number of years, this is about the time I've been on the board, actually.
Right.
And for many years, we were shifting 1.75, the maximum that we could shift. So even though we've gone down a little bit from shifting, so we're slightly below that, we're at 1.715, I think now.
Correct.
But it appears that is not had the desired effect to keep it steady between residential and commercial, that the commercial is increasingly bearing a higher burden, even though we're not shifting as much to them as we used to be. Have I got that right? Or?
I think, yes, for the most part. And so let me just back up. Yeah, the value, I stated 10, sort of oversimplifying it, but if you look at it, it was more like 9%. But the shift was still on average about 7. So you're going from 9 to 16, not 10 to 17. Right, that's correct. And you're also, the historic, if you look back, the 175 shift was adopted until during the recession, that period right in there, where we had some vacancies in the commercials and you backed off that vote from 175. So if I could take a look at the next slide, I think it'll help us. Okay. All right. So the next slide says, here's the blue is the levy shift. And as you can see, just more, at 7 is sort of the top, and mostly just below 7%. The yellow behind that is the CIP value. So I think, Selectman Daley, this may show you what you were saying. Back in fiscal year '05, the CIP, the combined commercial, industrial, and personal value, was 9%. This yellow was 9%, right? And now it's 10. So the commercial property has shifted from 9% to 10%. So that's a value shift, and with that has come an additional tax burden. All right, everything else being equal. So I think what you're saying is, yeah, it looks like it shifted more to commercial. I think the value is driving that, not so much your classification decision.
Yeah, and I think that's mirrored in the higher new growth percentage for commercial in this past year than we saw in single family. So if you take the growth, no, I did it wrong.
Value growth.
Yeah, I did.
No, but I can tell you what, I think commercial values have gone from 9 to 10%. Why is that? All right. I think one of the big drivers there, and not only is there investment interest in commercial property in a location like Brookline, certainly, but what's happened over this period is we've become an extension at least Brookline Village and some parts of Chestnut Hill of the Longwood Medical Area, right? And that's a very big value driver. If you can have a long-term, stable tenant, like those tenants that occupy properties in the Longwood Medical Area, it's going to increase the value of the underlying real estate. And that's exactly what has happened. You know, Brigham and Women's Hospital, Dana-Farber Cancer Institute rent a significant amount of space in Brookline. So, and I think we're going to see an increase in that. Children's Hospital, certainly, right? So our base has grown because of that. Not necessarily because of new property, because of increased value in existing properties and some renovations within those properties. Now, from next year forward, I think we are going to see commercial redevelopment growth. You know, some big projects, as we know, coming online. The completion of the 111 Boylston Street Extended Stay Hotel, the completion of the hotel and mixed-use property at former Circle Cinema site, 2 Brookline Place will be a fully taxable medical office building, and then on Boylston Street, the Audi dealership is proposing a redevelopment of that property. So I think those 4 projects, we're going to see significant value growth driven by redevelopment. Right.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you, my concern is, I feel that people look at, say, properties in Coolidge Corner, and they look at what nearby, you know, multifamily use is, and it's very high, and, you know, no matter how busy Coolidge Corner is, it's never going to be Newbury Street. And so my concern is that people, you know, try to drive these rents up so that that these properties are equivalent to luxury condos or something, and I don't want to contribute to all the business leaving Brookline.
Through tax policy?
Yeah.
I mean, is that what you think?
Well, I mean,
I have
it's just
some
one
thoughts on that.
factor, I realize, but.
I have some thoughts on that as someone who works with those properties daily. As we may all have heard, there have been rent increases in commercial property, retail property, and particularly in the Coolidge Corner area. That's, in our observation, not driven by tax policy whatsoever. It's driven by, you know, the real estate market. So what follows that perhaps is tax policy. You know, do we want to follow the increases in value by continuing to increase the tax or not? Tax classification can do something there. That's what we did in the recession. I think you backed off a little bit to say, look, we're losing tenants. Let's not make tax burden an issue. I've actually prepared a slide just that we've added since your book was prepared that I can show you towards the end of this presentation that compares one of our properties with a comparable property in Boston across the street on Com Ave. If you're interested, even though it's not in your presentation, I could add it, but I have it here. That I think highlights the difference between a higher tax rate and what we have is a considerably lower tax rate. So can I defer that further answer on that?
Yes. Okay, so you're saying our tax rate is lower than Boston, so for commercial?
I am, significantly.
Okay, okay.
And I was hoping you would show that slide. You had mentioned it to me.
Okay, and I'd be happy
the
to
other
do
day.
that.
Yeah.
I can do it now or go in order.
When you do it is up to you.
Well, you think if it's in a better flow, I can do it now. You want me to do that? I'll go to that.
Go ahead, yeah.
Sure, we're not. So here it is. Okay, so let's take a look. The property on the left is Landry's Bicycle at 890 Com Ave in Brookline. It's a building that's owned by Boston University, and this portion of the building is rented to Landry's Bicycle. All right. The fiscal year 15 real estate tax per square foot is $5.32. Right? That compares almost exactly to the median real estate tax per square foot of $5.33 town-wide in Brookline for commercial properties, not including commercial condominiums. all right? The property on the right is in the city of Boston at 1041 Com Ave. The tenant is EMS Sports. Similar properties, I would argue, in the same neighborhood, but in two different towns. The tax dollars per square foot is $7.46. The reason is driven by the tax rate. The value per square foot of Landry's Bicycle in fiscal year 15 is actually higher than the value per square foot of the EMS in Boston. The value per square foot of the Landry's Bicycle is over $300, $306 a square foot, and the commercial tax rate was $17.39. That gets you the $5.32. Eastern Mountain Sports, the value per square foot is $2.62, but the tax rate is $29.50. So the business owner is paying, as you can see, over $2 less if their property's in Brookline for a comparable property. And that doesn't follow true every property in every location, but I think these are reasonable properties to compare.
Okay.
Right. Now, the other place that we have across the street in a different city or town is Chestnut Hill. On the other side of Boylston Street is the city of Newton. We look at that. We look at Com Ave all the time for this reason. And also look at Boylston Street and Chestnut Hill. And what you find on the Newton side is significantly more redevelopment, interestingly, at least for now, on the Newton side, but a much higher tax rate for equal property. So their tax dollars per square foot is in a similar way much higher than that same property on the Brookline side, Route 9.
Well, I'm reassured. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had exactly the same reaction when
Right. So,
Mr. McCabe explained this to me the other day.
So, well, good, if that helps. That's our intent. So I'd like to shift gears a little bit and go actually to another topic, which is the residential exemption that we ask also for you to consider tonight and vote on sometime after the hearing is closed. The residential exemption was adopted in Brookline back in the, when it was first available in the 1980s, and has been regularly ever since, all right? And it works like this. The total residential value of, again, $17.7 billion is divided by the total residential parcel count. How many residential properties do we have? We have 16,900. To calculate what's called the average residential value, these are all residential properties, right? Anywhere from a condominium to an apartment building, all right? The average residential value is the basis for the exemption. The Board of Selectmen each year can decide what percent of that average residential value you'd like to set the residential exemption at. There's some worksheets in tab 2 that outline all the options to you pretty much. What I've highlighted on this screen is the 20% that you've continually adopted since its initial adoption here in the 80s, the 20%. So 20% of the average residential value is $209,000. So if you adopt that for fiscal year 16 and the taxpayers eligible for this, that value will be taken off their assessment before the tax rate is applied, all right? Some examples of when you apply the tax rate are on the next slide, all right? If we were not to adopt tax classification at all, yet adopt a 20% residential exemption, our single tax rate would be $11.32 for all property. That would create a residential exemption of that number, $23.72. A maximum shift of $175 would create a tax rate for fiscal year 16 of $10.38, and the residential exemption would be $21.75. And then I've presented, just in summary form, the 172 and the 170, all right? And the worksheet in the second tab presents more detail and more options. Also presented here of what we, in prior years, adopted, going back to 12, where the residential exemption was $1,890, up to The prior year, fiscal year 15, 2,044. Every
Wait,
property
is
that's
that
eligible.
the JFK homestead that
It
you're
is,
showing there?
yeah.
You
That's
want to
tax
sell
exempt.
that?
Right, yeah, it's a National Historic Site owned by the National Parks Service. So $2,044 was last year's residential exemption, which is applied to every eligible taxpayer with this condition that the law says that you must pay at least 10% of your tax, all right? So if that $2,000 reduces you to zero, the answer is not zero, all right? You have to pay at least 10% of your tax. Other than that, it's not a percentage applied to the assessment, it's a percentage of the average, and then everyone gets that, all right? One of the other worksheets in tab 2 gives you something Selectman Daley has asked me about every year, so I make sure to include that, and that's the break-even value, which from so tab 2, one of the worksheets that says residential exemption impact before classification. The break-even value is $1.67 million, which means if we were to, you were to adopt 20%, continue to adopt 20% residential exemption, all property assessed less than $1.67 million would gain some benefit due to the residential exemption, which is way more than half of our 1, 2, and 3 and residential condominiums, all right? Because this is based on the total, includes apartments and all types of residential property. Any property assessed more than that break-even point of 1.67 million would actually have a net loss due to the in their net tax due to the residential exemption. Because what the residential exemption does is it reduces the residential tax base from 17.7 billion to almost $2 billion, right? So the rate goes up. You have to have a higher rate. So the net effect of that is that the higher end properties actually pay more in taxes with the residential exemption.
But another way to put it is this is an attempt to make the real estate tax a little progressive.
Right.
Such that lower valued homes pay less and higher valued homes pay more, because the whole thing is a zero-sum game.
I wonder, Mr. McCabe, if you would just talk for a second about something we played phone tag about earlier today, the declining number of properties that are eligible for the residential exemption.
Yes, Selectman Franco, thank you. I can provide some information about that. I'm going to show you a slide in a few minutes that will put some numbers to this statement. But in every class of residential property, the number of owner-occupied properties has declined. And a home must be owner-occupied to receive the residential exemption. All right? As you noted in the material back in tab 1, Selectman Franco, that tax classification report, I believe it's the fourth line.
It's the fifth line from the bottom.
Fifth line from the bottom shows a steady decline in the number of eligible taxpayers for the residential exemption over the last several fiscal years. We believe the underlying reason for that is twofold. And again, I'll show you the numbers. The underlying reason is twofold. One is we have a regular audit program that we've put in place now, with your support from a couple of years ago, where we review taxpayers' eligibility, and if they're not eligible, we take them out of the program. Because how the residential exemption process is set up, you have to file an initial application, and then we continue to grant the residential exemption when there's no change in status. You continue to live there. If there's a change in status that you're not living there anymore, but you still own the property, then the exemption should be removed. And our audit program is designed to identify those cases. The second factor is that we believe more and more properties are being purchased for non-owner occupancy in Brookline, particularly residential condominiums, that they're being purchased for rental value to the owner and long-term investment. So, and I can show you those numbers. So those two factors are saying we have less owner occupancy in Brookline.
So in effect, we're increasing the taxes collected from residential parcels across the board, on average, because we're losing residential exemption properties.
The non-eligible property is indeed paying more in tax, no question about that, all right? But it's really just shifted, the benefit it's a zero-sum game.
Right, it doesn't affect our levy
The benefit is shifted to
limit.
those that receive it. The tax levy does not change.
Right.
And for the residential exemption, the shift occurs just within the residential class. Doesn't affect the commercial class whatsoever.
It probably benefits the more expensive properties who previously were bearing all the burden of the being on the wrong end of that equation. But now there is a lot of cheaper properties, but not residential occupied, so they also are with the higher value properties and, right?
The tax, the number of eligible properties to receive the residential exemption certainly affects the amount in aggregate of the exemption, absolutely. So if you only had one property that qualified, all right, then we would reduce the residential value by, $200,000, all right? So you're absolutely right. The fewer people that are qualify, the less the total of the exemption. And then the corresponding change in the tax rate is not as dramatic. So the tax rate might be, $11.33 if it wasn't for those properties that came out. That's how you could translate that, I think.
But it also has to do with the relative change in value of different types of residential property. So condos versus the increase in condo value versus the increase in single-family home versus 2 and 3 families.
Actually, the next couple slides, if I could, get to that point, I think, a little bit. So here, this slide is the average single-family tax and exemption from fiscal 5 to 10. So over the 10-year period, here on the left, the scale is tax dollars. So the red is the average single-family actual tax, and the blue is the amount of the exemption. So you add those together, and you see what the tax would be. And it's really just a proportionate slide that says, yeah, so the residential tax, there's a certain amount at the top there that I'm not paying. It's the exemption, all right? And on a comparative basis, this slide is the condominiums. Again, tax dollars, the lighter green is actual tax, the blue is the exemption. And you can see for the condominiums, the exemption makes up a greater part of the total. So they're gaining a greater benefit from the residential exemption because the average value is so much below that break-even point. Yep. All right. The next couple of slides, I want to take you through the impact of tax classification, assuming the residential exemption. So we're saying, okay, so we're going to assume the residential exemption, and we're going to look at the impact of that. So what's happening here is that you've got two groups of properties, single families on the upper half of this matrix, residential condominiums on the lower half. All right, the single family assessment, let me get my pointer up there, after the residential exemption is this number right here, 1,088,000. So the 200,000 has been taken off, okay? This number right below here is the the percentage of properties within that subclass, single family, that in fiscal year 16 will receive the residential exemption, 84%. In fiscal year 15, that was 85%. So that slipped 1%. If you look down below that under residential, below that in residential condominiums, and you'll see in parentheses 59%. The number or percentage of residential condominiums that are receiving the residential exemption, 59%. In fiscal year 15, last year was 60%. I want to highlight, so coming across the top is various shifts from 170 over to 175. All right. I put in the whole numbers here, not the same vote as last year, the 1.715. I'll show that somewhere else. But I wanted to grade out this box for demonstration purposes. So this is a single-family home, median, typical. We're using the median to represent that class. All right, median is the middle if you array all the values. So we select the median to represent that class, and we're saying that a fiscal year 16 vote of a 172 shift would increase this single-family homeowner's tax bill $631 year over year, or 5.9%. One way to look at that is 2.5% that we're going to apply year over year, and the 3.4% override, all right, of $6.2 million. So if you're looking for the very typical increase due to Prop 2.5 and the override, but no new construction going on, that's it, right there, okay? Now, that doesn't follow true with the other classes, as you'll see. The residential condominium, because of what Selectman Franco said, the value change wasn't uniform. So the residential condominium actually goes up for that same factor, 7.2%. You see how that works? These numbers over here in the yellow are the median tax from the prior year. And that's what we're basing the change over. All right. I'll go through a couple more. If you want to go back to this, we can. The next slide is the 2-family and 3 families. All right. As we learned a little bit earlier, 2s and 3-family values went up more than single family and more than condominiums. So that 172 shift here results in a 10.5% increase in tax on 2 families. And for 3 families, an 11.1% increase in tax, year over year. One more slide shows the multifamily and apartments, the combined class of anything from 4 to 500 units, of 6.5% increase year over year. Remember, the single family was 5.9, right? And the commercial median at 7%. And I select the 172 because it helped me demonstrate that 5.9, the 2.5, and the 3.4 without growth. Okay? So there are several slides here that look at impact. More detailed information is in your tab 2 worksheets, but the tab 2 worksheets for you also put all these on one sheet. Instead of 3 slides, it's on one sheet. All right, so you could go right down in tab 2, the form A in the upper right-hand corner. A means after the residential exemption, and see these same numbers all on one page. All right. Any questions about all of that? Okay. So I'd like to move on to the next topic quickly, and that's tax relief programs. We've showed you this slide every year because as taxes increase, it becomes harder for certain individuals to pay. So what the legislature has provided and the town of Brookline has adopted and modified in many ways are these various tax relief programs, starting with sort of a fading category called surviving spouses and minors, where we continue only to have 3 taxpayers in that program because taxpayers that generally qualify for that program also qualify for this one down here where there's 14 and it's more money, so we tend to give the taxpayer that one instead of the 17D. The veterans, I want to point out that the veterans of 67 is down from 71. The visually impaired of 42 is up from 37. So we're losing veterans in our tax exemption program, but we're gaining visually impaired homeowners. The 41C is 14. That's up from 8. Tax deferrals, which is an excellent program for the town. When the property is sold, the town receives the deferred taxes and a 5% interest back when the property sold, has gone up from 10 to 11 this year, and the senior work-off now at 30 has gone up from 23. So we've had an increase in overall in the number of participants in the exemption programs. And, you know, that group of programs is very important. We've added, with Hinland's help, we've added some more information to our website called taxpayer tax assistance page. You go and all these exemptions are in there. They're explained, and some additional exemptions as well, like the circuit breaker income tax one is there as well. So we work with the Council on Aging. We work with the Senior Center. One of the reasons we put it out here tonight is to make people aware of these programs. There are mean tested income, assets, age, number of things. But we're happy to talk to anybody at any time about any of these programs. So there's the slide I already showed you about the commercial. So that's all the information. I'd be happy to go back to anything or answer any questions. I also have our esteemed board here. You know, Dr. Peterson's an economist. He's helped us sort through some of these issues, and he's available as well.
So I think I'm going to suggest that we take Selectman Daley's idea to digest this, because there's a lot here to digest.
Yeah, and particularly when nobody actually came to the hearing, I like to give people a chance to contact us if they
Right.
are aware of this.
But by the way,
didn't
this
come.
is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? I see none.
I'd like to ask a question.
Go
I
for
agree
it.
with the idea that we should postpone the vote, but I noticed, Mr. McCabe, that the map,
Oh, we're going to go back to the map.
yeah,
Oh, you gotta try that video.
All right, Hinland, let's try it, okay? I don't know, I apologize.
How about that little thing at the bottom left? Is that the?
No, I think this is the one there we go. All right, so if you go to our website, thank you for reminding me to go back. What you'll see in the upper right is the rules. This is what you're seeing, fiscal year 16 assessments and certain information. You can go click on one of those pinpoints. It'll bring up that sale, specifically that sale, the picture, all the information about that. Alternately, you can type in a street. In this case, the example is Summit Ave. It'll zoom to the sales on Summit Ave, all right, and show you those. All right, you can, zoom in and out of this map on the website. You can move north and south, east and west. You can see where the sales are clustered, where there are no sales. You can click on them. What you don't have this year is the non-sales. So you can't say, oh, I want to check my house unless it's sold. All right, we're working on that for next year, and I think we'll be able to accomplish that. But this year it has the sales. It also has the condominiums. And what you'll see, for example, if there was a sale at the Brook House. The Brook House has 4 addresses. So you'll see 4 addresses listed. You click on any 4, it'll list any of the sales that sort of the vertical, the Z-axis issue. You'll see all the sales that occurred at any address with condominiums. All right? They won't be listed horizontally as separate addresses. They all have the same address. So that's ready to go. It's up today. This tax classification presentation is also on the website. If anyone wants to look at it, Selectman Daley, people say, I want to look at it. It's on the website, on the assessor's website. The sales assessment map app is up and running. We are available to answer any questions at any time.
well, I'm glad to see.
Back to your question,
I'm glad
Selectman
to see that the map that you're showing us here and that is online is a complete map. The one we have in our folder here is not complete. It cuts off part of South Brookline and part of North Brookline. So, and I noticed that there are sales in those places, so.
It covers the entire town,
Yeah,
right down to the detail of the individual property.
right.
Yeah, so the slide you have there is a product of software, not printing the whole thing. Right. It's very exciting. I think it's a terrific tool. We thank the GIS and IT group, Feng Yang, led us to this. That sales, the story map application is being used for other departments. I know the paths are on there, the parks are on there. It's really a terrific tool for the public. Thank you for reminding me
Okay, well-
about that.
Any other questions for?
No, I just want to say that obviously a lot of hard work went into this, and I want to thank all of you here who participated, and it is a lot for our poor, simple minds to digest, but we will do our best. I think you provided us certainly with all the information.
Good, thank
Let me
you.
ask a question. Going back to the
Selectman
map,
Green, yeah.
going back to the map, I noticed that there were indications of trees. Are those actual trees, or is that just?
This is not aerial photography.
Okay. That was my question.
So,
If they
different
were,
feat-
that'd be a useful tool for other purposes.
The town website in the maps section has a map with trees on it. But again, I think it's a graphic.
Just sort of an aerial view.
It's a layer in the GIS.
Very powerful. GIS has become a terrific tool. And our assessor's database, which I consider one of the best assets the town has for lots of reasons, not only fair and uniform assessments, but to identify property and neighborhoods and things that other departments can use. Right. So,
I just have a quick question about tab 2, the last sheet in tab 2. I want to make sure I'm understanding what it is telling us. So you actually submitted a revised version of this sheet that you touched on earlier that has sort of rows that are titled excess, over target levy, and then excess levy capacity. And I just want to clarify and make sure that I'm understanding that the excess levy capacity line is truly the amount of excess levy we have, including new growth and the override. The row entitled excess over target levy is the amount of levy either above or below what we committed to when we voted the override.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. And the way I'm thinking, and I would suggest the same to my colleagues, is that we work off of the target levy, because that's what we promised the voters, and I don't think we should go over that by a penny.
I agree.
Thank you, Selectman Waschinsky. Point of clarification then. So the numbers in parentheses are below, and the numbers not in parentheses are above, in that row that says excess over target.
So if we use the excess over target levy as our guide, the shift percentages available to us would be a subset of the shifts indicated. It would be.
Yeah. So in effect, it's what we would be committed to doing is what's on the page.
Yeah.
That was in the binder originally, not the revised page.
Correct.
So anything that says over,
Right.
as a result of our policy choice, we would not want to proceed with. Anything that is in parentheses would be allowable, again, under the policy choice that we've made.
Correct. Now, that's the way I'm approaching it. My colleagues don't, you can approach it any way you wish. So I guess we'll put this on the agenda for next week, and I'll invite anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this to us to send an email to, our emails are on the town website, or send it to town administrator's office, and it will get to us and for our consideration next week. Next week is going to be a long hearing, so we should think about where this fits on the agenda, either before or after the RMD. So we'll Mr. Kleckner and I will figure that one out this week. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. McCabe.
Thank you very much.
Nice, thorough job, as usual. And that concludes our business tonight. Good evening.